Hi guys, Andrea Jenkyns was invited onto Newsnight where she was challenged on her rhetoric regarding asylum seekers and immigrants. The former MP was asked about her support for similar comments made by the ex-Home Secretary Suella Braverman, which has been seen by most reasonable people as inflammatory. Now we know that Andrea isn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but her excuse was basically to point to 14 years of Tory mismanagement, and then she brought Angela Rayner into this. Have a listen.
I think you said illegal immigration represents an existential threat. Suella Braverman, your colleague, talked about an invasion of channel migrants, and you agreed with that language. It's inflammatory, isn't it? Doesn't it leave people thinking they're at war? And that takes them out onto the streets that violence is justified?
No, because you're not living in the northern communities where they, let's face it, they can't get housing. The housing waiting list at the local council, they can be waiting 3 or 4 years to get a house.
Okay, why are people waiting years for a house? Why do councils not have enough funding? Who was responsible for that? Could it have been the last government or the last number of governments? And who was in charge of those governments? The Conservative Party. Like, you're turning around now and saying, well, the reason people are out rioting is because they can't access housing. And who was responsible for housing? Who made sure that there was not sufficient housing built? My God.
GP appointments, dental appointments. I've got no...
Once again, dental appointments, GP appointments. Who was responsible for that? Who made sure that there were enough GPs hired? Who was responsible for giving dentists a decent contract? The government. Once again, it's Tories washing their hands of the situation. They create these problems, walk away, and then ask questions like, my goodness, why are people out on the streets rioting?
No problem with legal migration. I believe, our country is built on migration. And
what is illegal migration? Like, we keep hearing it from certain Tories, I don't have a problem with legal migration, I have a problem with illegal migration. What is illegal migration? Because what they seem to refer to is asylum seekers. People crossing the channel in small boats, but that's not illegal. So would one Tory please step forward and explain to us what illegal migration is? I really wish a journalist would actually push back on this and say, please explain to the audience here what illegal migration is. Because if they start saying, well, it's about asylum seekers, well, then that needs to be shut down immediately.
It's about having the right skills for our economy. But at the end of the day, when our public services are stretched, we shouldn't have an open door policy.
There isn't an open door policy. Who said that there's an open door policy? Once again, these are all straw man arguments. These are not real arguments that she's putting forward. But even if there was an open door policy, who was responsible for that? Your party, your government. Now, if you had a disagreement with the party, you could have walked away. You could have resigned, but you didn't.
But isn't it about the language used? That's the problem. The language used leads to violence.
Well, as I said, if we're talking about language of one particular, realm of political parties of the spectrum, we need to talk about look at the Deputy Prime Minister, what she said about Conservatives. So yes. And
oh my goodness. So she won't take responsibility. She's asked about the language she's used, about invasions and language that she's supported from colleagues, which was worse than that. Oh, these people are invading our country. They're breaking into Britain. Treat them as criminals. Of course, this rhetoric is going to filter down to the general public, and they're going to talk about invasions and about criminals, talking about asylum seekers, describing them as thugs, as people breaking into the country. If the politicians at the top are using this type of language and the media is not challenging them on it, or not challenging them enough, of course, ordinary people at the bottom are going to look around and say, well, these people must be criminals because, well, Andrea Jenkyns, a former minister, is describing them as so. So I must believe that they are. The media isn't saying anything different, so that must be true. That's all it takes. And finally, attacking Angela Rayner here. Of course, not taking any responsibility at all. Not saying, actually, yes, I'm holding my hands up. I use this type of rhetoric. These people are repeating this type of rhetoric at these riots. I take responsibility for that. No, of course not. She jumps to Angela Rayner, who described Tories as scum. Okay. What Angela Rayner was doing was describing the Tory party and what it's done over the last 14 years as scum. What else could you describe a party that imposed austerity, that took the lives of about 300,000 people with their policies, that denied poor people, poor children, a meal, who funneled money into the pockets of the richest in society and gave out contracts to their friends and donors? What else would you describe that as? A DWP, Department of Work and Pensions, that was headed by somebody who was completely indifferent to a story about somebody who had died of starvation because they couldn't access benefits. What else would you describe that as? But that's separate. That's attacking a party. That's attacking a government. This is about attacking people who have no power, asylum seekers. They have no money. They have no influence. This is what it's always about. Convince people who have little that their enemy is somebody who has less than them, and never look up. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.